Welcome back
to Counterculture. That's Pastor Mark. I'm Andy.
Hey, we talk about things that go against the culture, go against the norm, go against that which is...
I don't know that it's always against the norm, because a lot of stuff that we're going against is not normal. Ooh. We're the ones normal, I think. It's the craziness that we're going against. But I digress.
I like this. See, now I'm going to get stuck there.
I know.
I'm going to get stuck there. We'll
okay.
That'll have to be a different counterculture.
Yes, write it down.
I want to go. Well, no, we'll do it. First Samuel.
Yeah.
Chapter 14.
Yeah.
Right? Starting with verse 24. There's a very interesting little happenstance here. I want to get your take on it. So can you read like 24 through 30 for me?
Now the men of Israel were in distress that day, because Saul had bound the people under an oath, saying, "Cursed be any man who eats food before evening comes, before I have avenged myself on my enemies." So none of the troops tasted food. The entire army entered the woods, and there was honey on the ground. When they went into the woods, they saw the honey oozing out. It's a good biblical word, oozing out.
Yes.
Yet no one put his hand to his mouth, because they feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard that his father had bound the people with the oath. So he reached out the end of his staff that was in his hand and dipped it into the honeycomb. He raised his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. Ooh. Then one of the soldiers told him, "Your father bound the army under a strict oath, saying, 'Cursed be any man who eats food today.' That is why the men are faint." Jonathan said, "My father has made trouble for the country. See how my eyes brightened when I tasted a little bit of this honey? How much better it would have been if the men had eaten today some of the plunder they took from their enemies. Would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater?"
So we read this story, right? And again, I like this story because it goes on to say that the people actually stand up for Jonathan and don't let Saul kill him, and it's got a great ending, right? But there's this idea that the men are hungry, they're worn out, they're tired out, and there is something that
their strength is oozing
out, right? And there is something there that could brighten them, right? Could bring some strength to them. But they are forbidden to take it because of a rash oath, right, of the king. And so I was thinking about that in church today, thinking about that in Christianity, thinking about that in our culture today. That there are a lot of things that we could partake in that could strengthen us, could encourage us if we partook at that in a right way. But a lot of times we either self-impose oaths or promises or things that keep us from doing that, or it's been imposed upon us, a teaching, or somebody said, "Hey," I think about when I think of just different things, different moments that we could partake in, but we make it so complicated that we don't necessarily allow people to partake in those moments. And so what's happening is they're actually keeping people from strengthening themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? I think about that with, like, in church with different music and teachings. We're so worried about protecting things that sometimes we're keeping people from actually getting strengthened. Right? Mm-hmm. So give me your thoughts on that. And then maybe, all right, how do we protect people, but at the same time, maybe allow them to taste a little honey now and then?
Well, we criticize what we don't understand.
Right.
And we tend to protect what we think is ours.
Ooh.
I've been pastoring for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
You've been pastoring long enough to know taboo things.
Right.
My pew.
Mm-hmm.
The piano bench. The organ bench. Removing the organ. Not using the organ. I've always counted the money. I've always been on the board. Those are my areas.
Yep.
That is my identity. If I don't have those, who am I? What am I? And we will do that for the sake. We will get more upset. I've seen people get more upset over things like that than they have about the attendance in the church declining.
Yeah.
Because, well, that doesn't matter as long as I have my job and I can, that's your job, Pastor, to get people in here to do. And that's one of the things that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Is, don't worry about playing the piano because you ain't going to have to play it, because if there ain't no one here to play it, to sing, it doesn't really matter whether you play the piano or not. So what's really the important thing? And so I think that's part of where God is bringing us as the church. He's saying it's not about your bells and whistles and your smoke and your fancy songs. It's just about raw worshiping in spirit and truth.
Amen.
I personally feel that that's what we've been seeing at Asbury and around other places around the country. It is not, and that's what some of the stuff I've been reading. It's not about, oh, well, they had great music, they had this, it was great preaching. It was Jesus.
Yep.
It was Jesus. And so I think, you brought up very well, rather, with Saul. It was a rash oath.
Yeah.
Because it was about him and it was about his pride. None of you are eating until we get my enemies slaughtered. And then, okay, wise guy, you're not going to get what you want here because your guys are too weak to do what needs to happen. So what if? So now I'm going to tie this in because what I'm hearing is that this movement that has been going on in our country for the last couple is a movement of young people. Now I'm an old people now. I hate to say that, but I'm an old people now.
Yeah.
And my prayer has been, God, if you need to send some of those young people up here to spark a fire, because the older people the more mature people are getting affected by this too.
Yep.
But Jonathan here, he's younger, and he goes, you really messed up on this. I mean, your son is a younger guy. I mean, there's things I get from him. Don't tell him.
We're not going to.
Because we're going to have to grease his ears to get him through the doors if he hears us talking about him. There's wisdom in him that I'm like, I never thought about it that way. But, So how do we get? I think we got to get our focus back on God, and not our pride, not ourselves, not the flesh. And say, wait a minute here. I'm looking at something in the room right now that says the battle belongs to the Lord. And we got to, because I think that we know Saul had a problem with his pride and his arrogance and carnality. And that can happen to any of us. I don't mean to berate him. It can happen to any of us.
At any moment.
At any moment. And we say that in our culture all the time. I'm going to get what's coming to me.
Ooh, what's mine?
I got robbed of something. So I'm going to get it back next time. And I'm not going to go any further with that. But how about a little humility? It goes a long ways. It goes a long ways.
Well, I think I love what you're saying there, right? I think one of the things that is important here is Jonathan says at the end there, my father has troubled.
Yes.
Right? He's caused trouble in this. And I think as pastors, we struggle sometimes with this because, people come and listen to us on Sunday morning. They don't have a lot of opportunities. When I was a kid, you could listen to your pastor Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and usually a Bible study somewhere in the midst, 3-4 times a week. Now, most people only listen to their pastor Sunday morning.
That's it.
If they're listening, right?
Right?
But throughout the course of the week, they have opportunity to listen to other people. And I know a lot of pastors, they really struggle with that. They don't like the other voices and the other things. But if someone has an opportunity to listen to another voice and get strengthened from that, well, then we better take heed to the fact that we don't want to be troublemakers either. Right? If God would use somebody else to strengthen my people, that's going to benefit me. Right? Because again, I don't need them loyal to me. I need them loyal to Jesus and to the cause of Christ. And we get really caught up in that, right? We think loyalty to me means loyalty to Jesus. And I've seen a lot of examples of how that's just not true.
I recently read an account of a evangelist. He was the father-in-law of the pastor, and he came and preached a revival. And this saint, came out, and they're standing out there gripping and grinning like pastors should do. And this dear old saint comes up to the evangelist, says, "That is the first time I've ever heard that message preached like that." And wandered up, and the pastor's just mortified. And he looks over at his father-in-law and he goes, "I have preached that over and over again." He goes, "I know you have, son." He goes, "It's just today she heard it."
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it requires another voice
Right. And would we want
to say it.
Would we want to remove that opportunity for a brightened countenance and a strengthening and all of that stuff? No.
When God speaks, any old bush will do. I pastored with a guy when I was out in Kansas City. He was out in the Topeka area, somewhere out there west, whatever that means. And I remember him sharing at a pastor's meeting or something about how his son, his teenage son, liked hanging around this guy in the church who was a handyman, and he had apartments and rental properties.
Yeah.
And he loved hanging out with him, and he would go learn things. And he was like, I had to get to the point where I had to say, you know what, this is a good Christian man. Mm-hmm. My son is connecting with him. That's okay.
Yep.
When God speaks, any old bush will do. And sometimes, or a donkey, or whatever. And I could really pursue that, but I won't.
Good, thank you.
So can we say, wait a minute, it's okay, God's speaking here.
It's okay.
Or how about when David is having mud clods thrown at him by that guy, and the Secret Service say to David, "Do you want us to go take him out?" And he goes, "No, God may be speaking through him."
Yep, exactly.
We don't think that sometimes God is saying things to us through the people that we get. I don't like criticism, but I have to look at it and say, you know what? I acknowledge your position. I promise to wait carefully before taking action. I may not agree with you, but at least I'm going to listen to it and say, maybe God is saying something to me through this.
Really hard when we just simply don't like those people.
Yes, right.
Taking wisdom from people we don't like is a really hard thing.
And as iron sharpens iron, maybe the rough edge on that person is the very thing that's going to, hone you a little bit.
Yeah.
Not me.
Stuff.
This is only for you.
I knew that. I know. I presented it that way. Yeah.
All right, good.
Lots
just as long as we
stuff
know
to think about. We're going to leave it right there. Boom! Hoping that your countenance has been brightened a little bit.
Is that a mic drop?
Some of this
Did
stuff.
we mic drop anything?
Do
we mic drop?
Yeah, we frequently mic drop.
All right.
Hey, we'll see you next time on Counterculture.
Grace and peace.